Good morning. I'm Jillian Black, and welcome to the Department of Family and Support Services Program Design, Management, and Continuous Quality Improvement RFP webinar. Next slide. Just a few housekeeping rules. Due to the valuable participants, everyone has been placed on mute. Please submit questions via the question box. And we will respond to the questions at the midpoint and end of the presentation. Please use the question box to notify us of any technical issues. Please be advised this webinar is being recorded. Anything stated at this webinar is not intended to change the solicitation document. Any changes will be in writing in the form of an addendum issued by the Department of Family and Support Services. The purpose of this webinar is to provide information for the solicitation. A copy of the recording will be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel with a link to the recording, and a PDF of the PowerPoint slides will be posted at the DFSS webpage. This will take up to 5 business days. DFSS retains the right to share a list of registrants to this webinar, along with their contact and organizational information at our discretion. Joining me today is Jonathan Weber, Senior Director of Operations for Youth Services, as well as Solomon Martinez, Youth Services Coordinator, to discuss details regarding the RFP. As for the agenda, we just went through the welcome and introductions. We will now go through the purpose, background, some information about the scope and the program description, selection criteria, timeline. Then we'll go through the technical assistance for applicants and e-procurement, and finally, a final round for questions. And I will now hand it off to the program team to discuss the details of the RFP.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. As Jillian said, I'm John Weber. I'm the Senior Director of Operations for the DFSS Youth Services Division. Happy to share information about this RFP, Program Design, Management, and Continuous Quality Improvement RFP. This is the first time that the DFSS Youth Services Division has released this RFP, and we're really excited about the services included in this program and the supports that it will provide to our delegate agencies and to young people in the city of Chicago. Purpose of this RFP, DFSS is seeking a qualified support service delegate agency to provide subject matter expertise, training, and professional development to our Youth Services Division direct service providers to ensure consistent design and implementation of high-quality programming and services for Chicago youth. The services in this RFP focus on the following areas: trainings, workshops, and resources related to the contractual and programmatic requirements, youth development program design best practices, and organizational capacity building, and data management. Data management services that support continuous quality improvement, including development and implementation of participant surveys, along with associated analysis and reporting. Resources that support the involvement of parents, caregivers, and community stakeholders in program planning. Additionally, this support service delegate agency will provide workshops for youth and families or caregivers rooted in trauma-informed and healing-centered practices that supplement the wraparound supports and services provided by our direct service providers. And in partnership with the DFSS Youth Services Division, our direct service delegate agencies, and participating youth and their parents and caregivers, this support service provider will ensure that our direct service delegate agencies are equipped to meet those program requirements, to thoughtfully design and deliver high-quality programming, measure the impact of those programs, and build a consistent practice of continuous quality improvement across all of our program areas. The goals of this RFP include increasing understanding among staff from our DFSS funded direct service providers related to youth program design and management best practices, organizational administrative best practices, and essential administrative and contractual processes. Annual trainings and workshops are anticipated to engage 600 staff members from Youth Service Division direct service providers each year. Engage 1,000 youth and their parents and caregivers each year through workshops that supplement the services and resources provided by our direct service delegate agencies, connecting them with needed services and resources. Effectively measure the outcomes of participants in DFS Youth Services programs and utilize outcome and performance data to drive quality improvement. Inform DFSS, our direct service providers, and program participants and caregivers about program outcomes and best practices in program design and management. And lastly, increase understanding among DFSS staff and staff at our DFSS-funded direct service providers about current practices among those providers related to engaging with participants, parents and caregivers, and community stakeholders for the purpose of program planning. Increase utilization of best practices in these areas among direct service providers. Next, I'm going to provide information about the current state and priorities for improvement. In terms of current state, I'm going to provide information about current state for youth in Chicago, for youth serving organizations, and for DFSS's work to support our direct service providers, to understand the impact of their programs and to incorporate that understanding into continuous quality improvement. Beginning with the impact of COVID-19 on youth. Of course, over the last 4 years, youth nationwide have been challenged by profound health, economic, educational, and societal impacts of the pandemic. COVID exacerbated social inequalities and has long-term implications for social and health outcomes. Research indicates that the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic can be mitigated by comprehensive prevention strategies from place-based institutions, such as consistent opportunities for youth to participate in safe and supportive environments, enhancing access to services and resources, mental and behavioral health supports, and interactions with caring adults. This is largely the work of our direct service delegate agencies through the many program models that we fund and support through the Youth Services Division. In terms of the current state for youth serving social service providers, prior to the pandemic, there was extensive documentation of high levels of stress, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout among staff in social work settings, as well as research into the positive effects that organizational supports may have on offsetting those impacts. The unprecedented circumstances of COVID-19 resulted in a dual exposure in many social service settings to the stresses of the pandemic for social workers and others in social service settings due to their frontline work with individuals experiencing crisis and the inability to limit exposure to the same risks in their personal lives. Within the field of youth development, literature and best practice point to the importance of a highly skilled workforce in delivering effective and impactful programming. Young people receive the greatest benefit when the adults who facilitate the programs are well prepared and supported, simply stated. Unfortunately, many nonprofits experience significant staff turnover and instability as a result of the pandemic, and that continues to have lingering effects and implications for staff training. Locally, we understand that approximately 52% of staff at our direct service delegate agencies who facilitate programs directly with youth have been in the youth field for less than 3 years, and nearly 65% have been with their organization less than 3 years. Agencies have frequent staff vacancies and extended periods of time devoted to hiring and onboarding. These overlapping factors inevitably impact capacity, quality, and sustainability. And in terms of the current state for the DFSS Youth Service Division training, professional development, data management, and continuous quality improvement practices, our division contracts with more than 150 direct service delegate agencies that implement programming across 16 program models. These programs fit into enrichment, youth employment, and prevention and intervention portfolios. We organize a series of trainings and workshops to build consistent understanding of program requirements and best practices, to address learning needs that result from staff turnover at direct service providers, and to build a supportive community among our delegate agencies. Training topics are identified based on input of agency staff and our youth service division staff. In 2023, more than 650 individuals representing approximately 150 delegate agencies across all 3 program portfolios attended trainings and workshops. Lastly, our division utilizes participant surveys as a primary method to gather data on youth engagement and programming and whether programs achieve their desired outcomes. In conjunction with these surveys, we make aggregate data available to our direct service providers and facilitate training to incorporate insights from those surveys into a program improvement. These training sessions are empowering for staff within and across agencies and also support DFSS and our programmatic monitoring and planning for future program changes. In terms of priorities for improvement, national research on the workforce of youth-serving organizations and survey data from our direct service providers underscores the need for training and professional development, particularly due to high turnover, short tenure within the field, and/or within a particular agency, and a reliance on external training providers. We seek to better understand how training and professional development is a most effective complement to what's provided by our direct service providers, and how it best meets the current and emerging needs of our delegate agencies. Many of the Youth Service Division's direct service delegate agencies have experienced substantial organizational or administrative transition over the last 3 years, including mergers, changes in executive leadership. The Youth Service Division seeks to support capacity building among our direct service providers to better equip those agencies for high-quality program delivery and long-term sustainability. Thirdly, in implementing a robust set of trainings and workshops that cover numerous content areas and develop programmatic and administrative competencies, we'd anticipate that direct service providers' programming demonstrates more consistent alignment with best practices. I have a couple more priorities for improvement here. DFSS's commitment to outcomes necessitates an intentional approach to continuous quality improvement by our direct service providers. We seek to assess and strengthen our survey design and implementation processes, develop a unified approach to outcomes assessment across our 3 programmatic portfolios, enhance associated training for our direct service providers, and contextualize findings from these surveys within the broader landscape of youth program research. We anticipate that investing in continuous quality improvement will result in improved outcomes for participating youth. Lastly, Youth Services Division seeks opportunities for direct engagement with youth and with their families and caregivers, particularly to reduce barriers to connections with other youth services programs and make more effective connections with citywide services. Additionally, direct engagement with youth and their families and caregivers may help us identify strategies to improve coordination across service delivery areas and supplement the current practices of our direct service agencies to provide wraparound supports and connections to needed services. Next, I'll describe target populations. There are 2 target populations that would be served by this program. The first is staff from our direct service delegate agencies, and the second is youth and their parents and caregivers who are engaged in a series of workshops. Staff from our direct service delegate agencies. DFSS implemented a survey in winter of 2023 that aimed to establish a baseline understanding about the staff that support our DFSS-funded youth programs, including their backgrounds, their tenure in the youth field, and their organization, and their current role, and access to training and professional development opportunities within the preceding 12 months. The responses to that survey revealed a relatively short tenure within the youth field. 46% of respondents have worked in the youth field for 3 years or less, with 23% in the field less than 1 year. 75% of respondents have been in their role for 3 years or less, with 38% in their role for less than 1 year. 43% of respondents identify as facilitating programs, identify that they facilitate programs directly with youth, have been in their role for less than 1 year. Approximately 41% of respondents identified as having multiple roles in their organization. And those roles could include facilitating programs directly with youth, supervising staff that facilitate those programs, overseeing the planning and development of youth programs, organizational leaders or administrators or volunteers. Survey respondents reported a high degree of participation in trainings and professional development, both in terms of the number of training hours and the range of content areas. 41% indicated they participated in 11 to 30 hours of training in the past 12 months. And 84% indicated they attended trainings in at least 4 content areas in the previous 12 months. The support service delegate agency that will be selected through this RFP will work with our direct service delegate agency staff who work directly or indirectly with youth enrolled in our programs. Therefore, the successful respondent should be knowledgeable about best practices regarding organizational structures serving youth ages 6 to 24, including youth, identifying with the prioritized groups listed below. These are among the target populations that are served through the program models funded through the Youth Services Division. Next, we'll move on to program requirements. And first, starting with required qualifications and experience for the staff that would be involved in managing and implementing the program. Project manager, who would manage the administration and general management of the program, should have credentials or experience in youth development and youth program design or administration, organizational development administration, data management, program evaluation, or community engagement. There's a number of equivalent degree options listed here. We're also seeking experience working with city, state, or federally funded programs that serve at-risk populations and experience in project management. The subject matter experts who would be involved in planning and leading the training for our direct service providers, we outline in 4 areas. Subject matter experts in youth development have credentials or experience in youth development and youth program design. They're familiar with current research in the field. They have experience with trauma-informed and healing-centered or restorative practices. The subject matter experts who would participate in organizational administration and capacity building training would have experience in organizational management, strategic planning, communications, stakeholder engagement, HR, fiscal management, operational policies and procedures, etc. The subject matter expert who would plan and facilitate data management trainings would have experience or credentials in program evaluation, survey methodology, continuous quality improvement, information technology, data systems, and data software. And the subject matter experts that would plan and lead trainings and workshops for parents, caregivers, and community engagement would have experience or credentials in culturally competent and accessible approaches to community engagement and education, workshop design and facilitation, providing training and materials in multiple languages. Respondents will be required to provide resumes or job descriptions that describe the qualifications of the personnel who would be in these roles. Okay, now for the required activities. Trainings and workshops for direct service delegate agency staff. There are 4 component areas for these trainings and workshops. They're listed here: delegate agency onboarding, youth program development, organizational administration and capacity building, and data management. Details about the objectives and key topics within each of these component areas are included in the RFP. Encourage everyone here to review those in detail. Required activities across these trainings include developing training topics and materials, differentiating training to meet the needs of participants across content specializations and roles, ensuring accessibility of those trainings, managing logistical details that includes invitations, space rental for in-person trainings, speaker or presenter fees, etc., and implementing surveys to assess the learning outcomes of those training sessions. Trainings in data management support for continuous quality improvement. The requirements include developing and implementing participant surveys, quantitative and qualitative analysis of survey data and distribution of the results of those surveys, facilitating discussions with our staff, as well as training sessions with direct service delegate agency staff, facilitating focus groups or feedback sessions with youth program participants to gather additional data based on their experience in those programs, and summarizing findings of those surveys in reports. Workshops for youth and parents or caregivers. These workshops should be trauma-informed and healing-centered and be complementary to the supports required of our DFSS direct service agencies in each of those program models. Examples include youth health and well-being, employment 101, financial literacy, citywide resource fairs, etc. Required activities associated with offering these workshops include developing training topics and materials that are accessible for varying ages and cultural backgrounds, ensuring accessibility of those trainings, managing all logistical details, invitations, space rentals as needed, speaker or presenter fees, etc., and implementing surveys to assess the learning outcomes. And lastly, developing resources to strengthen parent, caregiver, and community involvement. So the required activities for these services will help our direct service delegate agencies establish consistent and effective engagement with parents, caregivers, and community stakeholders. The agency will assess the current level of parent, caregiver, and community engagement practices, produce a report summarizing those current practices, any gaps, and recommendations for improvement. That report would occur in year one, or the end of year one, and provide direct service delegate agencies with a resource kit and sample materials based on that findings of that report to support strengthened parent, family, and community engagement practices. That would occur in year two. The next section is performance goals and outcomes. So we are seeking respondents with evidence of strong past performance against the desired outcome goals. And performance indicators include the following outcomes. 90% of those participants surveyed indicate that learning objectives were met. So this refers to participants who are surveyed that attend trainings and workshops. 75% of those surveyed will report increased understanding of program requirements and DFSS or City of Chicago processes. That in particular is associated with delegate agency onboarding trainings and workshops. 75% of those surveyed will report increased understanding of best practices in youth development. 75% of those surveyed will report increased in implementing youth development best practices in their program design and management. 75% of those surveyed will report strengthening their data management processes and continuous quality improvement. 75% of those surveyed will report an increased sense of support from DFSS in designing and managing youth programs and fulfilling their contractual requirements. 75% of those parents and caregivers surveyed will report an increased awareness of citywide resources and services. And lastly, 75% of those surveyed report strengthening their parent, caregiver, and community involvement practices. DFSS also intends to track output metrics that may include, but are not limited to, a minimum of 12 trainings per year provided to our direct service delegate agencies, with attendance data and participant evaluation summaries submitted within 14 days following the training. A minimum of 2 youth, parent, and caregiver workshops conducted per year, with attendance data and participant evaluation summaries submitted within 14 days following each training. 75% of the Youth Service Division direct service delegate agencies participate in trainings each year, and a minimum of 2 monthly check-ins with the DFSS project manager. Quarterly summaries of surveys provided will be submitted on the 15th day of the month following the close of the quarter. So April 15th, July 15th, October 15th, or January 15th. Next, we'll discuss the selection criteria for applicants. The application asks questions in 5 sections. Those are community involvement, organizational capacity, strength of the proposed program, performance management and outcomes, reasonable costs, budget justification, and leverage of funds. So we'll walk through the selection criteria in each of those areas. In the area of community involvement, DFSS will evaluate applications based on the following criteria. The respondent demonstrates a clear understanding of the target populations, those target populations being staff at our DFSS-funded direct service providers and youth and participants in DFSS-funded programs and their parents or caregivers. That includes their strengths and assets and needs and challenges. Respondent has expertise working with the target populations and has relevant capabilities or infrastructure needed to serve this group. The respondent's leadership reflects and engages the diverse people of the communities it serves. And the respondent demonstrates a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access in their internal operations. In the area of organizational capacity, DFSS will evaluate applications based on these criteria. The respondent has qualified staff and credentialed staff responsible for program oversight, management, and delivery of services. The respondent has adequate human resources capacity to hire and manage staff, the project manager or subject matter experts in particular. The respondent has relevant systems and processes needed to collect and store key participant and performance data. And the respondent has adequate systems and processes to support monitoring program expenditures and fiscal controls. In the area of strength of proposed program, there are many questions in this area in the application. Lots of questions that break down the components of the required services. And so the selection criteria include the following. The respondent clearly defines the trainings and workshops for direct service delegate agencies that are appropriate in addressing the needs of that target population. The respondent defines data management support for continuous quality improvement that's appropriate in addressing the needs of direct service delegate agencies. Respondent defines workshops for youth and parents or caregivers that's appropriate to addressing the needs of the target population. Defining how it would provide resources to strengthen parent, caregiver, and community involvement that are appropriate to addressing the needs of the target populations. The respondent's proposed program of trainings and workshops is supported by strong national or local evidence base and or aligns with best practices in program design, management, and continuous quality improvement. The respondent's proposed program of data management support for continuous quality improvement is supported by strong national or local evidence base and or aligns with best practices. The respondent's proposed program clearly addresses the unique needs of staff at our direct service delegate agencies and is differentiated based on the content specializations of staff, and their roles within the organizations. So for example, what are the unique needs of staff in out-of-school time programs versus youth employment programs, or programs that primarily focus on serving justice-involved youth, as well as roles within their organizations, meaning youth-facing staff, facilitating programs directly with staff, or supervisors or program directors that design programming, or administrators. The respondent's proposed program utilizes both in-person and virtual methods that maximize accessibility and engagement. Respondent's proposed program utilizes coordination, collaboration, or partnerships to deliver services to the target populations in a client-centered and comprehensive way. And lastly, the respondent defines how their proposed program will effectively recruit and engage participants. That may be staff at direct service delegate agencies, or youth and their parents and caregivers. In the area of performance management and outcomes, DFSS will evaluate applications based on these criteria. The respondent demonstrates evidence of strong past performance against the desired outcome goals and the performance metrics, and or other notable accomplishments in providing services to these target populations. The respondent has experience using data to inform and improve its services or practices. The respondent has experience using disaggregated data to identify performance trends and to identify disparities in program delivery. And the respondent has experience providing training to adult learners and tracks and reports performance for those trainings. The last area of the application, reasonable costs, budget justification, and leverage of funds. DFSS will evaluate applications based on these criteria. The respondent has the fiscal capacity to implement the proposed program, and the respondent demonstrates reasonable implementation costs and funding requests relative to its fiscal and human resources. The proposed budget supports the proposed scope of work or work plan. There are a number of required attachments that would be submitted with the application. So the respondent must attach resumes or job descriptions for key staff, including the project manager and subject matter experts, in the 4 content areas I described earlier, those content areas for the trainings and workshops. Respondents must attach your organization's proposed budget for this program to make sure that all program requirements are addressed and that the total of your program budget matches the anticipated award amount listed in the RFP. I want to note that allowable costs outlined in section C3 of the RFP, which you can read here. The grant may support the following: personnel costs or costs associated with trainings and workshops, including rental facilities, speaker fees, costs of meals and refreshments that are appropriate for the program, reasonable, and support the core operations of the program, local transportation, and other incidental items to such conferences unless further restricted by the terms and conditions of the award. Survey platform subscription costs and agency administrative costs capped at 10%. Administrative cost allocations can be used for personnel, fringe benefits, operating and technical costs, and or professional and technical services. Respondents must also attach a completed cost proposal indicating the per unit cost for each component. For example, in-person training and youth development best practices, or survey analysis. The total amount must match the anticipated award amount listed in the RFP, as well as the total amount in your budget. And make sure that there's alignment and consistency across those items. In terms of our evaluation process for reviewing the submissions to the RFP, applications will be evaluated on the strength of the proposal and the responsiveness to the selection criteria that were presented and discussed earlier. Failure to submit a complete proposal or respond fully to all requirements may make your submission subject to rejection. So want to make sure that you are thorough and comprehensive in responding to all those requirements. The commissioner may, upon review of recommended agencies, may reject, deny, or recommend agencies that have applied for grants based on previous performance and/or area need. DFSS reserves the right to ensure that all mandated services are available citywide and provided in a linguistically and culturally appropriate manner. In terms of the selection and transition timeline, pre-proposal webinar is today, Thursday, June 20th. The due date to submit questions that arise from the webinar today, Tuesday, June 25th. We'll be issuing an amendment with responses to those questions. Applications are due Friday, July 12th at noon. Those deadlines are very firm. Late submissions will not be accepted. And then the program period begins October 1st. Next, we'll talk through budgets and cost proposals. So the term of the contract will be October 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2026, just over 2 years. Based on need, availability of funds, and contractor performance, DFSS may extend the term for up to 1 additional year. The amount for this RFP for 1 year is $260,000. Administrative costs will be capped at 10%. Those administrative cost allocations can be used for personnel, fringe benefits, operating or technical costs, and/or professional services. There is no matching requirement. Some RFPs require matching funds from other sources. This one does not. Again, stressing that respondents must submit both a completed budget and a completed cost proposal. So the cost proposal that will be submitted provides the average cost for each type of required service listed in the RFP. We really want you to be thoughtful and inclusive when developing your cost proposal so that you apply for the program's actual costs. Those per unit estimates must include all costs described in the cost proposal. So when you review that attachment, there's a description of what would be included in each of those unit costs. Be prepared to explain the reasoning behind this estimate for those items in the appropriate section of the application. The year 1 total estimated price, you'll notice in the cost proposal at the bottom, it summarizes the year 1 estimated price. That amount should match the anticipated award amount listed in the RFP, that $260,000. And important to note that only the approved unit rates in the RFP pricing proposal will be accepted during the contract term. So if your agency is awarded a contract, your cost proposal included a unit cost of $10,000 for a conference style training, that is the rate that would be accepted during the contract term. So encourage you to, as you're developing that cost proposal, to look closely at section C of the RFP, which describes all the components of each of those required services. Applicants will also submit a budget for 1 year, 12 months of services. Cost category definitions are attached as budget instructions, so please review that. Use the reasonable cost question on the application to discuss how you determine the costs reflected in the budget. So explaining your rationale or the justification for pricing a certain component or a certain service at the level that you have. We recommend using the 0140 line, which is the professional and technical services, to list all the services and the specific unit costs from your cost proposal. So again, if in your cost proposal you suggest $10,000 for a particular service, you would list that particular service and that amount in your budget. alignment across those forms is necessary. And just to describe a couple common errors that we see in budgets. If you are listing staffing, make sure that your job description titles and your job description uploads have the same title. Consistency is crucial. Put a brief description of the job in your budget document itself if you have not discussed it specifically in your application. So we can clearly understand what's being proposed in the application, how that is represented in your budget, what set of services those correspond to. Make sure that you're putting your budget in the appropriate column. There's a column for the agency share and for a share of costs that may be covered through other sources if you are leveraging other funds, which is not a requirement, but if that is the case for your proposed program. And lastly, the important deadline. Applications are due July 12th at noon. Our system does not allow us to accept late applications. The only way we'd be able to accept a late application would be if we would reopen the RFP and make everyone resubmit their application. And that is not something that is likely to happen. I believe that concludes my portion of the presentation about the RFP program requirements. Jillian, are we opening for questions now?
Yes, I don't see any questions as of now, so we can go into application tips. Next slide. Start early and save often. If you have never done business with the City of Chicago, please register into iSupplier, also known as eProcurement, ASAP. Review RFP narratives and application questions closely. Remember, they align with the scope and the selection criteria. Please use the information in the RFP for guidance in formulating your answers. There is a 4,000 character limit, which includes punctuation and spaces. Each response is allotted 4,000 characters. Please do not use the back button on your browser. And again, we continue to stress to save early and save often. Start early and save often. Slide. Tips for working in e-procurement. If you can submit your application and amend it later up to the end of the due date of July 12th at 12 noon. Avoid the rush and possible mishaps by submitting early. Plan on submission taking approximately 30 to 60 minutes. Please be advised that late applications cannot and will not be accepted. If you have any issues, please make use of the e-procurement hotline for help at 312-744-4357. This hotline operates during business hours only, Monday through Friday, 9 through 5 p.m. Again, save often and submit early. Next slide. There are some new agency requirements. We ask that applicants provide articles of incorporation and any amended articles of incorporation. We ask that applicants provide an IRS affirmation letter. Please be advised this is for not-for-profit agencies only. The letter must be dated within 60 days of submittal. You can obtain this by calling the IRS directly at 1-877-829-5500. If you are a for-profit agency, submit your original letter from the IRS showing your FEIN number. A DUNS number is also required. Central contractor registration is now required as well. You must provide a copy of the entity overview page on the www.sam.gov website. Lastly, a certificate of good standing letter with the state of Illinois is required. As of April of this year, we have a new labor peace agreement ordinance. This will apply to all DFSS and CDPH delegates that have 20 or more employees working for their organization. The only exemption is hospitals. This applies to all contracts that are enter into after April of 2024. Contractors must provide written notice to the commissioner or her designee within 72 hours of becoming aware that employees want to organize or that a union seeks to represent employees. Contractor must enter into a labor peace agreement within 90 days of receiving notice from a labor organization that it represents or seeks to represent employees. What you might ask, what is an LPA? The LPA is an agreement between the employer and the labor union that ensures that an organizing drive is not impacted by union busting techniques, including employee retaliation, and in return, they will not strike/stop work in a way that will impact human services. Next slide. For technical assistance, there on DFSS webpage, there's a link to the RFP of interest and training documents on the alerts. For questions on registration and e-procurement technical assistance for delegate agencies, please reach out to customer support at cityofchicago.org, or please feel free to call 312-744-4357. We also have a link for training materials that includes documents and videos on the cityofchicago.org website. Now we're going to discuss intern responses and accepting amendments. There is actually an amendment up now, so this is perfect. We're going to go into it to discuss and learn how to accept an amendment. Step 1, select create quote from the drop-down menu in the actions box and then click go. This will take you to the application page where you can get started. In the RFP you are interested in, if it has been amended, in this case it has, you will need to acknowledge and accept the amendment to start and or submit a response. To accept the amendment, click on View Amendment History up at the top of the page. Next slide. To begin the acceptance and acknowledgement process, follow these steps by clicking View Amendment History. Click on the document number. Next, click on the infinity or eyeglass icon to review the amended changes to the RFP. And then lastly, click on the Acknowledge Amendments button to acknowledge receipt and understanding of these changes and then proceed. By acknowledging the amendment, you are indicating that you are aware of the changes to the RFP in the amendment. Next slide. Step 3, when you get to this screen, click on the I accept the terms and conditions of the RFQ and also acknowledge the changes made to the RFQ amendment document. Click on that checkbox and then click on acknowledge. Next, click on yes to indicate that you confirm your acknowledgement of the amendment. Next slide. Finally, click on the checkbox that you accept the terms and conditions and then click on accept to accept them. This is the final step in acknowledging and accepting the amendment. Next slide. Next, we're going to delve into how to submit an application. Step 1, when you are ready to submit, start by saving your draft one last time and then click continue. Next slide. If you are missing information, you will be given an error message at the top of the page. Please see in the upper left-hand corner, it says error, the RFQ control requires you to quote on all lines. So this is very helpful in FMPS that it'll inform you that you're missing information. So that's very helpful. Next slide. Usually the error messages direct to something left undone in the application. There in the last example, the error message indicated that the lines had not been filled out. Next slide. In this example below, the error is about an unanswered question in the application or the requirements section. The quote value refers to your, in this case, missing answer. Next slide. Once the application is free from errors, you are ready to proceed and submit. At this point, clicking continue should put your application into the review and submit phase. This is your last chance to review all of your data and confirm that it's accurate. Please check your attachments, scroll to the bottom of the screen, and see all of your responses. By starting early, you can double check your work. So remember to start early and save often. Here's step 7. At the bottom of the screen, you'll be asked to provide an electronic signature. Be sure to fill in the signature before checking the box. Next slide. Lastly, you click submit at the lower right hand of the screen. Make sure that you see this submittal confirmation screen. It's very important. The e-procurement system will send an email within 24 hours of your submission. Please feel free to call or email me if you desire confirmation prior to then. Any questions? I don't see any questions in the Q&A box, but we have until June 25th to submit any questions to John and I, and then we'll submit any questions and answers received in the form of an amendment. Next slide. Lastly, for more information for program questions, please reach out to Jonathan Weber at 312-746-7451. His email is listed here below, john.weber@cityofchicago.org. And then for any non-programmatic questions, please free to reach out to the e-procurement hotline. Again, there are opening business hours on Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. They can be contacted at 312-744-4357. And their email is customersupport@cityofchicago.org. And you can also reach out to me. My name is Jillian Black, and my email is jillian.black@cityofchicago.org. This will conclude the webinar for program design, management, and continuous quality improvement. If you have any questions, please reach out to us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
I want to say thank you, everyone, for your interest in this opportunity, for the work that you do to support young people across the city of Chicago, and for the thoughtful work that you'll do to review and submit this application. We know that it takes a significant time and attention to submit these applications, and are grateful for your interest and investment in doing that.
Thank you all.
Have a good day, everyone.